The Gold Cup quarterfinals are happening really soon, so it's only right that I give you my predictions for these set of games. And we got some exciting clashes coming up, like Mexico versus Saudi Arabia, a 2022 World Cup rematch, Panama versus Honduras, Canada taking on the underdogs Guatemala, and the United States taking on a young and upcoming Costa Rica side. This will be absolute cinema. So with that being said, let's find out what I think will happen with my predictions. And trust me, you're gonna want to stay until the end, because I might have a crazy upset in this video. Now let's start this video off by talking about the first quarterfinal clash between Mexico and Saudi Arabia. And let's go over each side first before I give out my final prediction. And we're gonna begin by talking about Mexico first. Now Mexico has recently been on the slight come up. In March of 2025, they finally ended up winning their first Nations League thanks to a Panamanian defender handballing the ball in the last minute of the game, and Raul Jimenez scored from the spot to help beat Panama 2-1 and lift Mexico's first ever Nations League. And then heading into the Gold Cup, Mexico played better than the US against Switzerland, only losing 4-2, at least they scored, and then actually ended up beating Turkey 1-0, something that the US failed to do. And due to Mexico's great form as of late, they've definitely been labeled as the favorites to go all the way and win back-to-back Gold Cups this summer. Will it happen though? Well, I guess you gotta stay and find out, since we all know I am the prediction GOAT on YouTube. No, I'm not Jinx Buto, that's a lie, I swear. Anyways, Mexico's first game of the Gold Cup was against the debutants of the tournament, Dominican Republic. And Mexico were the better side in this game, as they should have been, with them having the more shots on target, and a large majority of the possession was 62%. But don't be fooled by just the stats. The Dominican Republic were a threat, not initially though, because Mexico were getting all the initial chances, and they would finally put one in the back of the net in the 44th minute thanks to a header from Edson Alvarez off a corner kick to put his nation up 1-0. Then right away in the second half in the 47th minute, Raul Jimenez would score his one-on-one chance and put his country of Mexico up 2-0. And from here on, it seemed like Mexico were going to see this game out with ease. But the Dominican Republic would show some fighting spirit in the 51st minute, with Peter Gonzalez getting by two Mexican defenders and scoring a super accurate shot into the side of the net to bring one back for the Dominican Republic. But thanks to another corner kick, Cesar Montes would score unintentionally because the ball hit off his face, and Mexico would get their lead back 3-1. Mexico scored 2 goals in this game from corner kicks. Mikel Arteta's influence is unmatched, but it would not end here, because in the 67th minute, Edison Ascona, one of Dominican's star boys, would score a great goal to bring one back and scare Mexico yet again, but Mexico would end up holding on to win 3-2. So definitely not the most impressive way to start off the tournament as a giant of CONCACAF, but 3 points to 3 points. Mexico will take it. Now the second game for Mexico was against Suriname, and man, this game for the most part was a snooze fest, especially that first half. But in the second half, Mexico would finally show up, and Cesar Montes would actually score a brace in this game to help Mexico win 2-1. And guess what? Both of his goals came from a corner kick. Now, Javier Aguirre, the Mexico head coach, is taking a page out of Mikel Arteta's book. There is no way. Pro must love Arsenal, I swear. Oh, and fun fact, the center back Cesar Montes is now leading the Golden Boot race with his 3 goals as a center back. That's the most CONCACAF shit I've ever seen in my life. And then moving on to the last game against Costa Rica to see who would top the group, it seemed like Mexico were going to collect all 3 points. But due to VAR, Santi Jimenez was seen in an offside position, and Mexico would end up drawing this game to Costa Rica 0-0. They would still end up topping the group though, so fair enough to them. But how this goal from Santi didn't count amazes me. The ball literally hit off a Costa Rican player before it got to Santi. I thought that literally resets the play. Somebody who understands how this rule works needs to let me know why this goal didn't count in the comments down below, because for me, this goal should have counted. And I'm a USA fan, I'm just being honest. But enough about Mexico, man. It's time to talk about the Middle Eastern nation that was invited to the Gold Cup this summer. It's Saudi Arabia. Now Saudi Arabia are currently in an iffy place at the moment heading into this summer's tournament. You see, things were not going to plan in Asia World Cup qualifying, so they fired Roberto Mancini and hired back the man who led Saudi Arabia to defeat Argentina 2-1 in their first game of the 2022 World Cup, Hervé Renard. But even with him, things have not gone to plan in World Cup qualifying either. And although they made it to the 4th round of Asia World Cup qualifying, the fact that they haven't guaranteed a spot at the 2026 World Cup yet is alarming. And who knows, they might not even make it from the 4th round. That's a genuine possibility. But talking about this Gold Cup campaign, it started off great for Saudi Arabia, with them defeating Haiti 1-0 thanks to a penalty from Saleh Al-Shehri, despite getting pelted back all game, and despite Haiti having all the better stats in the game, like more shots on target, and even more possession. Regardless of all that, Saudi Arabia would get the very important 3 points as they head away against the United States. Now this game, Saudi Arabia would defend for their lives. They literally just placed the Great Wall of China in their box and tried to prevent the US from scoring. They had chances themselves though, but none of them went in. Instead, in the 63rd minute, Chris Richards would score a header in which a Saudi Arabian defender's kneecap barely kept him on sides, and USA would end up winning this game from that 1-0. And honestly, I don't think Saudi Arabia were even that bad. I mean, respectfully, they were expected to lose against the US, so it wasn't the end of the world, especially with them collecting 3 points earlier. But then in the last game against Trinidad and Tobago, Saudi Arabia just had to make sure they didn't lose. And although ex-USU team player player Dante Sealy scored an absolute screamer for Trinidad in the 10th minute. Faris Albricon was scored in the 60th minute to tie the game, and the match would end in a 1-1 draw, which meant that Saudi Arabia would finish second in their group and qualify to the quarterfinals, where they have to play Mexico. And now that brings me to what my prediction is for this game: Mexico winning or Saudi Arabia winning. Now, as everybody on the Nabuto channel knows, I'm a big fan of trying to call an upset, even when logic doesn't stand beside me. And I got a little spidey tingling feeling that something crazy is gonna happen in this match. So with that being said, I got Nah, y'all really thought, bro. I'm just playing, bro. Saudi Arabia is not winning this shit. I bet y'all Mexico fans were scared for a little second. Don't worry, bro. I got Mexico winning this game 2-0. Come on, man. They are not getting knocked out by Saudi Arabia. But if they do, the hate watch would be generational. On to the next game we go, and we gotta talk about Panama versus Honduras. And let's start by talking about Panama first. Now, as we all know, Panama has been a rising nation in CONCACAF recently. After all, they made the recent Gold Cup final in 2023 and made the Nations League final in 2025. They literally own my country, the United States. They deserve to have the canal named after their country for real. But heading into this tournament, Panama were gonna have to face a serious issue, and that's their main man and captain Coco Garcia was gonna miss the entire Gold Cup for Panama, which meant the nation didn't have their best player on the pitch for them. And in a pretty evenly split group, this was gonna be an issue. But low-key wasn't actually an issue, I'm not gonna lie. I was just baiting y'all. That's because in the first game, although yes, they conceded twice to a side that isn't even recognized by FIFA, Guadeloupe, they still beat them 5-2, which is pretty good, because Guadeloupe were low-key performing pretty good at this Gold Cup. Then in the second game, they had to play Guatemala, a side who cooked in their first game against Jamaica, which I'll talk about more later. But despite facing this tough Guatemalan side, they dominated the match, having 21 shots at Guatemala's 3, 8 shots on target at Guatemala's 1, and an overwhelming amount of possession with 69%. However, although Panama did get the 3 points, they only managed to score 1 goal thanks to Tomas Rodriguez in the 19th minute. But still, even though they only scored 1 goal, at least they won the game and got the 3 points. Then in the last game, they had to face their toughest opponent on paper, Jamaica. And despite Jamaica having the more shots and more shots on target, Panama smoked Jamaica, converting every single shot on target they had. Ishmael Diaz scored a deflected goal in the 4th minute, then he got a little bit lucky with his second goal in the 17th minute due to some bad goalkeeping from Andre Blake, uncharacteristic from him for real, and then he secured his hat-trick through a penalty in the 45th minute. And with his 3 goals, he's actually on top of the Golden Boot race, now over Cesar Montes, a person who I mentioned in an earlier section of the video. But anyways, even though Jamaica scored a goal to bring one back, they failed to score another goal, even though they low-key should have won a penalty, I'm not gonna lie. That was definitely a foul. And after one more goal for Panama, Panama stomped all over Jamaica and slapped them up 4-1. And with that, Panama topped the group with a maximum of 9 points. And fun fact, they scored the most goals at the Gold Cup so far with 10 goals. So big up to them. Their coach, Thomas Christensen, is doing wonders with his Panamanian side, and I'm sure we're gonna see this side at the World Cup. But enough about the Panama glaze. I shouldn't even be glazing them after they own my USA 3 times in a row. So let's just swiftly move on and talk about Honduras next. And their tournament did not start off the best at all, because in the first game against Canada in Vancouver for some reason, I have no idea why Canada randomly hosted one game of the Gold Cup, but whatever, they got absolutely destroyed by them 6-0. It was a party for the Canadians in this game, and it was a terrible start for the Hondurans. And after this match, I low-key lost hope that Honduras were gonna do anything at this tournament. I mean, they seem booty cheeks. You can't really blame me for thinking that. But actually, the next game against their bitter rivals El Salvador, although they didn't get a majority of the possession, they had the more shots and shots on target, and they made it count. First thanks to Romel Cueto in the 33rd minute, and then in injury time, they sealed the deal thanks to Dixon Fairman's Ramirez Roches in the 9+5th minute. Dixon. And with these 2 goals from Honduras, they bounced back in dramatic fashion against their rivals to win 2-0. Well done. But the real test was going to be in their last game against Curacao, a Curacao team that arguably should have beat Canada, but at the very minimum, forced them to drop points. And despite losing out on all the major stats, like the shots, shots on target, and the possession, Honduras were the ones who got the victory. First thanks to a gorgeous strike from Jorge Alvarez in the 32nd minute, K golazo by him, wow. And although Curacao got one back from a terrible goalkeeping error from Edric Menjivar, literally have no idea how this happened, bro, that was some FIFA shit, Honduras would get the late winner thanks to their starman Luis Palma, who scored a goal in the 9+1st minute to seal all 3 points in what felt like a must-win game. And thanks to this win, Honduras finished the group in 2nd place despite having a -3 goal difference. So although Honduras were awful in the first game, I gotta give them credit. The way they bounced back in this tournament was phenomenal. But I'ma just keep it real, Honduras actually have no chance against Panama. If the game was taking place in Honduras, I would say maybe they would, but Panama under Christensen are just such a better team. They're not gonna lose to the likes of Honduras at the Gold Cup, respectfully. So with that being said, I got Panama beating Honduras 3-1 in the quarterfinals, and they're gonna be the ones who make the semifinals. No upset in this one. Anyways, it's now time to go over to the other side of the knockout stage bracket and talk about Canada versus Guatemala. And we're gonna start this clash off by talking about Canada first. Now Canada, dare I say it, were probably the second favorites behind Mexico to win this Gold Cup this summer. That's right, above my USA. A lot of recent results are going their way, like beating Ukraine in the friendly before this tournament started. And under Jesse Marsh, Canada have been looking like a different animal compared to before. Yes, they were missing some key players like Alfonso Davies, who is out due to an injury, Moise Bombito, who's also out due to an injury, etc. But they still brought in a ton of their top players, like the new captain Jonathan David, one of the the best strikers in the world, dare I say. Tajon Buchanan, who's been electric for Canada recently. Promise David, the striker who just helped USG win the Belgian league for the first time in like 90 years, etc. Canada brought in some top players, and they're hungry to win their first Gold Cup since their only one back in 2000, so the pressure was on. But off the gate, they proved that the pressure was not affecting them, because against Honduras, as I said already, they slapped them up 6-0 and took care of the game with ease.
Dead.
It was literally no competition for them. It was just a party over there in Vancouver. However, the next game against Curacao, wow, Canada were awful compared to their usual standards. Despite getting an early goal thanks to Nathan Saliba in the 9th minute, Canada just looked so dead, man. Even if you look at the stats, they had the same number of shots, only had one more shot on target, and even though they had the more possession, it was just by a minuscule amount. And dare I say it, Curacao deserved the 3 points in this game. First, they scored an absolute wonder goal from Jurgen Locadia, the dual natural from the Netherlands originally who played for Eindhoven Albion. That goal should have counted for how beautiful it was, but it was taken off by VAR for just barely being offsides. Such a harsh call, man. I feel for Curacao. And although they did eventually score a goal in the 90+4th minute to get at least a point out of this game, they were definitely hard done by, and they definitely deserved the win in my eyes. But still, a 1-1 draw is nothing to get too pissed about for Curacao. But for Canada, it was. They looked dreadful. Then their last game against El Salvador, yes, they had the much better stats, having 14 shots, 4 shots on target, and 81% possession. El Salvador weren't really trying to create anything, as you can see by their stats. They were already out. They were just trying to make this game as ugly as possible, and they did a good job of that. It was not a fun watch. But here's the thing, Canada did win 2-0. First thanks to Jonathan David, who scored in the 53rd minute to get his first goal of the Gold Cup, and then Tajon Buchanan, who scored 3 minutes later in the 56th minute to double the lead. However, Canada only managed to score their goals after El Salvador went down to 9 men. Yeah, they got 2 red cards in this game. Both were fully deserved, but these last couple of games for Canada are making me think a little iffy about them. But now it's time to talk about Guatemala, who have been this summer's pleasant surprise at the Gold Cup in my opinion. In the first game against Jamaica, it seemed like initially they were going to be beaten, despite them obviously going to have a majority of the home support, just because Jamaica's team is so much better on paper. And yes, even though Jamaica had more shots and the possession, Guatemala actually had the more shots on target because the Jamaicans are absolute frauds, and they made that count. Yeah, Guatemala scored an offsides goal in the game, but they also scored a legitimate goal from Oscar Santos in the 32nd minute to give Guatemala that 1-0 lead they desperately wanted. And what a backheel assist, huh? That was beautiful. And since Jamaica are frauds, respectfully, Guatemala would end up winning this game unexpectedly 1-0, pulling off the upset. Shout out to Guatemala, man. They deserve this result. And Jamaica, although I absolutely hate the guy, don't like him whatsoever, recruit Mason Greenwood to your national team for your own sake. You need him. Now moving on to the next game between Guatemala and Panama, I mean, I already talked about it before. Panama were the much better side and they won 1-0. It was a much deserved win for them, so you can't complain too much about that. But the game Guatemala had to win was against Guadeloupe, and luckily for them, they did just that. First in the 13th minute, after they were awarded a penalty kick, and Jose Carlos Pinto converted to put Guatemala up 1-0, and then Olger Escobar would double the lead in the 29th minute to make it 2-0. However, Guadeloupe would provide a scare thanks to Ange Freddy Plomain's penalty in the 50th minute, but one of the best players in Guatemala, if I do say so myself, Rubio Ruben, the ex-US international who played 7 times for us with the senior team, scored in the 70th minute to restore that 2-goal gap in the match. And although Matias Phaeton was scored in the 78th minute to bring one back, it wasn't enough, and Guatemala would win this match 3-2, collecting those crucial 3 points and finishing second in the group. Well deserved. Now listen, it's no secret that Guatemala certainly aren't a great national team, but you know what they have? They have the power of friendship, something that's really prevalent in anime, and with them always gonna have the fans on the side, and with them amassing these great results, I don't know, man. I feel like something is brewing in the pot right now. And even though on paper Canada is miles better, and more likely than not they're gonna win this game, I'm a man who likes to be bold, a man who likes to call an upset. And I did say in the beginning of this video that there might be an upset in this one. Well, for me, there is, because Guatemala will play the most terrorist ball you will ever see, and they'll somehow snatch a 1-0 victory from one shot on target throughout the entire 90 minutes and beat Canada to make the semifinals of the Gold Cup. I know, I'm crazy for saying this, but Guatemala, I believe in y'all. I believe in the power of friendship. Guatemala, Guatemala, Guatemala. But now I think it's finally time we talk about the Southern United States versus Costa Rica quarterfinal. And for this one, we're gonna begin with the United States of America. Now heading to this Gold Cup, we've been absolutely trash, utter garbage. From losing 2-1 to Turkey, mainly due to a mistake after being 1-0 up in a friendly, to then getting absolutely slapped up and destroyed by Switzerland 4-0, with all their goals coming in just the first half, to also Christian Pulisic not wanting to participate at the Gold Cup for the USMNT, etc. It's been an absolute mess for my national team and for keeping it real. Not only that, most of this roster is a B/C team, apart from a few players, because of the Club World Cup, injuries, etc. So our squad isn't even that good for this tournament too, 1 year out of the World Cup. So yeah, as you can see, it's not a fun time being a USA fan right now. And if you all want me to dive into the USMNT problems a little more deeply, I'll probably make a video that encompasses everything that's going on after the Gold Cup ends. Anyways, to start the United States' Gold Cup campaign, we had to play Trinidad and Tobago. You know, the team that knocked us out of making it to the 2018 World Cup. Yeah, those guys. But fun fact, other than that game, and the game where Serginho Dest got a red card, Trinidad has gotten smoked by us almost every time. And this game was no different. Malik Tillman ended up scoring his first 2 goals for the United States in this game. Ajamon gets a lucky hit off his foot from Diego Luna for his goal to go in, and then Brendan Aronson would add another one in the second half, and so would Haji Wright, a player by the way who is now out of the Gold Cup due to an Achilles problem. Yeah, we are so cooked. But regardless, we did get off to a hot start in this tournament, despite playing players who aren't good enough at this level in my opinion, like Patrick Ajamon and Max Armstead. I don't get what Posh sees in these guys, but let's just move on. On to the next match we go. We got USA versus Saudi Arabia. Now this match was not fun, as I said before some time back in this video. Saudi Arabia literally just sat back and let us attack for the most part, even though they did have good chances of their own to counter. But like I said, in the 63rd minute luckily, Chris Richards, one of the few A-team guys and our best performer in the Gold Cup so far, scored a great header from a Sebastian Berhalter free kick. That's right, the son of Greg Berhalter, our old fraudulent head coach, and Richards scored to help us secure a 1-0 win over Saudi Arabia. And this was a pretty good result. I mean, Saudi Arabia are tough as nails at the back. They've conceded literally the same amount of goals as Mexico so far in this Gold Cup campaign, which just shows how sturdy in the back these guys are. So beating them is a pretty impressive result in my books. But then in the last game against Haiti, we finally rotated Arfson out, thank goodness, for John Tolkien, who looks so much better in the left back position. Let's keep it real. But for some reason, we still played Ajamong up top. Are we dead ass right now? But to be fair to Botch, Haji Wright is out injured, and Damian Downs was also injured for this match. So it's either him or Brian White, mid versus mid. And to be fair to Ajamong too, although Tillman scored earlier, Haiti equalized due to a Matt Freese mistake in the back. And like I said, thanks to Ajamong, he finally scored a goal he created by himself at the Gold Cup to help us win 2-1. Shit guy finally scored. Let's go. And I low-key was talking some smack on Twitter before he scored, and then I low-key jinxed it as I usually do. Jinx Buto, you feel me? Because he scored literally 4 minutes after I tweeted out my initial tweet. That is crazy. But anyways, after this goal, we had Charlotte FC talking smack on Twitter, with also Ajamong answering the haters. And fair enough, I mean, he did score, but Charlotte, man, pipe down. Ajamong should be nowhere near the USMNT A team. I am so serious. They keep glazing his 5 goals in 9 games, but half of those were like from Cam Cupier. That shit doesn't even count. But anyways, back to the USMNT as a whole. We got out of the group with 9 points. We will take those. But now it's time to talk about our opponents in the quarterfinal. A pretty good and young Costa Rican side managed by the one and only Miguel Herrera. This is going to be interesting, and one of the first real tests for Pochettino and his American men at this Gold Cup. Now Costa Rica were heading into this tournament in some good form. They finally finished the second round of CONCACAF 2026 World Cup qualifiers, where they topped Group B and made it to the third round, where they have a pretty simple group that they should be making out of to qualify for the World Cup. But now for the Gold Cup, they were feeling confident heading into this, like I said. But their first game against Suriname was not easy. Despite scoring first in the 14th minute thanks to Alonso Martinez, and then one of the top goal scorers in the tournament right now, Manfred Ugalde, scoring in the 19th minute thanks to a penalty, Suriname would end up completing a comeback in the game, with Gerano Kerk, who has been balling out for Suriname all tournament, scoring in the 34th minute, Richonel Margaret scoring in the 59th minute, and then Shaquille Pina scoring in the 64th minute from a penalty kick for Suriname to take a 3-2 lead. From here on, it seemed like Suriname were going to pull off the upset and grab all 3 points. But one of Costa Rica's best players overall and in this tournament, Josimar Alcocer, scores a great goal in the 76th minute to bring everything even Stevens in the match. And then in injury time, the captain of Suriname makes a very stupid challenge and gives Costa Rica a chance to score from the spot, and which they did because Ugalde's a baller. And Costa Rica would end up winning this absolute banger of a match 4-3 to start off the Gold Cup. What an incredible game, man. This was truly back and forth. First Costa Rica was winning, then Suriname, and then Costa Rica. Just simply incredible stuff. But that penalty would cost Suriname as they failed to make it out of the group stage. But moving on to Costa Rica's second match, they had to play the Dominican Republic, who seemed to be the dark horse of this tournament, giving a slight scare to the Mexicans in the previous match. And they gave a slight scare to the Costa Ricans too, with João Orbaiz scoring in the 16th minute to give the Dominican Republic the 1-0 lead early on in this game. The fact that Dominican Republic were balling out despite not having their star players like Junior Firpo and Mariano Diaz not playing is simply sensational, but it wouldn't end up well for these guys, because Costa Rica's Manfred Ugalde once again would score from the spot in the 44th minute and then celebrate with the jersey of Juan Madrigal, who broke his leg in the match against Suriname. Prayers up to him, speedy recovery. Also speedy recovery to Tyrese Halliburton. I know that came out of nowhere, but seeing him get injured in Game 7 was painful. And then late in the second half, one of Costa Rica's best players, like I said, Josimar Alcocer, scored in the 85th minute to seal the 3 points for Costa Rica and guaranteed them a spot in the next round. Costa Rica are simply inevitable, man. Streets will also never forget that 2014 World Cup performance. Shameless plug, if you want to learn more about that, check this video I made about them. It's a good one. But now on to the last game. Costa Rica had to play Mexico to see who would claim the top spot in this group. And this game was an absolute stinker, like I said already. Literally nothing of importance happened. But like I said, Santi Jimenez scored a crazy bicycle kick at the end of the game. It was seem like the winner, but it did get called back by VAR due to Santi being offsides. Oh, and also very critical information that I didn't mention earlier regarding this upcoming quarterfinal, but Ugalde got a second yellow card against Mexico, which means he'll be out in the quarterfinals versus the US. And speaking about versus the US, let's talk about what my prediction for the USMNT versus Costa Rica is. And listen, this is going to be a tough match for both sides, especially for the US, because we've been booty cheeks. But when it comes to the Gold Cup, the United States simply has an obligation to make at least the semifinals. We won't fail before that. Plus, with Ugalde being suspended for the game, that's a huge relief for the United States. Plus, the USMNT have actually been good defensively so far in this tournament. We only conceded 1 goal, and that was literally from a mistake in the Gold Cup. up, so I can see us doing well. So in the game against Costa Rica, it's gonna be a snooze fest, but I'm gonna say 1-0 United States, Malik Tillman will score, and the US team will progress to the semifinals. So now with all that being said, who do you guys think will win each Gold Cup quarterfinal clash? Let me know down in the comments. Now if you enjoyed this video, please remember to subscribe, I really appreciate it. Also follow me on my Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, and join the Discord community. All the links are in my YouTube description. And last but not least, if you want to learn about everything that happened in the 2026 World Cup qualifiers in the June international window, you definitely want to check out this video right here. You won't regret it.